Namaste everyone, and welcome to another episode of Musings of a Modern Day Mystic with me, Amy Yasmin. So I thought I'd come on today and share an episode about disempowerment, this powerful theme that kind of followed on naturally, progressively from taking a pause, from that place we left last time on the podcast. And I didn't realise at the time that it was disempowerment, and yet that was the heart of what I was facing in that week of pause and letting the plate stop. So I invite you to settle down, join me for a nice deep breath. And enjoy. So, having paused, having taken a week off work, and ridden through the waves that came with actually giving myself permission to have that pause, that time and space that was so desperately needed, I was able to start noticing some of the things that weren't working for me in life, things that I weren't happy with, things that I'd been distracting myself from, and things that I'd been aware for a long time weren't working for me. And the gift of that week, as uncomfortable as it was in many ways, especially being home alone, it actually gave me the opportunity to notice things, to hear things, to listen, to really deep needs and feelings that I hadn't been acknowledging, that I'd been too busy or too afraid to even acknowledge. Because part of me had been aware that if I had acknowledged them, I'd have known that I would have had to do something about it. And at that time, I just felt done with everything. After a few days and things are starting to settle, I'm starting to feel a desire to do something. There's a part of me that's wanting change. I have no idea how. And that's part of the overwhelm. That's part of this aspect of feeling helpless in some ways. And I'll turn that to you. Is there any areas in your life that you've come to feel at this moment that you feel a bit disempowered in, a bit helpless about, or a victim of circumstances, whether that's in relation to work or finances? Maybe it's some relationships in your life, and that could be work relationships, it could be family relationships, it could be friendships. Is there anything that leaves you feeling a little helpless, a little frustrated, a sense of dissatisfaction? And for me, that pause was enough of an invitation to begin to learn the gift, to realise the gift of facing what wasn't working, of looking at the discomforts, those uncomfortable truths, and being with them. And so I noticed, for example, that I had really, really poor boundaries around my work life and my home life. Because I was working from home, I was doing paperwork at home, and there was no boundaries between the switch on and switch off. I had in my head a desire for working between this time and that time. But because that work was always available, because it was on a laptop, there was a degree of flexibility which meant those boundaries became porous. My work was physically in the house. It was always staring at me, and I so disliked the paperwork. It felt like someone was always in the room, someone that I didn't like was in the room looking at me, calling for attention, and I'd rather not even look in their direction. Right? And so my living room, the place that's supposed to be a place of relaxing, restoring, family time, just you time, had actually become a place I really disliked being, because it was me for hours sitting on a laptop screen, typing away, and it really wasn't serving me, and I felt awful. I felt awful even with the thought of it. I felt awful doing it. I hated it. I realised it was an aspect of the work. It was an aspect of the work that I'd chosen to take on, even though I hadn't thought about the consequences or the longer term. So in the shorter term, I was like, I can't see this changing about the work. So is there anything I can do to help me feel better about it? To make it a bit less onerous, a bit less intrusive on my personal life? And so I chose, right, let's have stricter boundaries on where I'm working. So I stopped doing it in the living room and actually chose a different space that was dedicated for work. And I also chose to put my work things, because they were at home, I chose to put things that were calling for my attention under a throw, to literally put them out of sight. There's a saying, out of sight, out of mind, so that I would only be engaging with work when I chose to. It wouldn't be a constant reminder and a niggle. I'd meet it when it was time to work, and I could put it away when it was time to put it away. Literally locking it away, and that's done. And part of me was aware that I'd like to do less admin. Didn't quite yet feel confident or know how that might be possible, or to even broach the subject. But I was aware, and that was a step. Just being aware that there was something I could do to make it a bit less over-facing became helpful. Because having that throw over became a relief. Just a very simple, practical tool. I'd also become quite dejected in many ways in my state of being, in my perception of the world, because there was so much going on in the news. There were so many world events at the time that proved highly controversial and divisive across the world. It was a time of Brexit and lots of debates publicly within homes and communities. In America, there was the presidential election of Donald Trump, and lots of just different perspective and viewpoints shouting for attention. Conflict in the world. I was aware of environmental challenges, of migration challenges, and I felt so helpless about it. I felt awful to see all that was going on in the world and to feel like there's nothing I can do about that. What can I do? And so the thing I decided to do to help myself at the time was to stop watching the news. I couldn't change what was going on in the world around me, but I could choose what I was going to let into my awareness. Because me feeling awful about everything wasn't changing it. It wasn't serving me, and it wasn't serving the world. So I chose to switch off from the news. And I'd read loads of inspiring quotes and things like that. I chose instead to stop noticing the things, stop focusing my attention on all the things that seemed wrong with the world, that seemed like they needed fixing in the world, and to just let that be for a while. And then there was also my health, which was a massive, it had been a massive part of inner struggle and challenge and growth for many, many years, having experienced an eating disorder in my teen years that lasted long into the 20s. It was a mindset, it was a physical experience, it was ingrained in so many different ways. And for years I'd feared to even consider my physical health, because I'd been aware potentially what implications longer term an eating disorder might have on my body. I was aware that I hadn't been making great choices for health in general, although I'd been training at the gym and I was getting more muscular and I was more conscious of what I was eating. I was also making many choices that were for convenience. I was very fearful of symptoms I was experiencing through IBS. And so I'd come to fear eating out and about. I'd come to fear how that might impact on my work if I had symptoms. So I'd stopped eating in certain places. I was running on empty too often. I wasn't eating the greatest quality of foods because it was things that were safe or easy to do. And I realised in the long term, if I wanted a healthy body, that wasn't going to work. And looking the other way wasn't going to help me. So, having sat with the discomfort of that, I decided, right, okay, what can I do? Is there any way I can make this easy for myself, whether that's batch cooking, whether that is looking up some inspiration online? And I realised that actually just the mindset that I had at the time wasn't helpful, because I was thinking I wasn't in a great place, and so I wasn't wanting to look at it, to try and kind of change my mindset and just see it as, this is just a lifestyle choice. I'm just choosing to make choices that feel healthy, that feel like they're going to help me thrive. And yeah, I don't have to do this overnight. So how can I go about it? So I started to think about simple, easy, healthy recipes that I'd be able to take with me, that wouldn't necessarily trigger me, and that would be easy for me to eat and digest within the schedule I already had. If my work circumstances weren't going to change, how could I do things differently that might better support me? So from being at a really despondent place, things had started to shift through a week of great discomfort, of much mental turmoil, because I was sitting with all these judgmental thoughts about how selfish can you be for even taking time off, how is it going to impact on other people, what are work going to do without you. All these kind of thoughts came up, and a lot of the mental dialogue at the time was not very glowing. There was a lot of self-dissatisfaction and self-criticism. And yet, being in that place of discomfort, and I was deeply unhappy, yet being present with it and being aware of it and not running away from it was actually a gift for me, because something in me had the strength and the resilience to keep waking up and showing up for that. I was blessed to have a supportive family around me. I'm blessed to continue to have the support and the family around me. And actually, I realised how often I tried to do things alone. And I'd come to feel helpless, because I felt like everything weighed on my shoulders, and how could I meet all this? There were so many things that needed fixing, I thought, in my life, in the world. How am I gonna change it? And yet that overwhelm was eased by knowing I had a quote that was just about today. If all I do is to just wake up and show up to get dressed, maybe that's enough. Just the fact that I'm choosing to carry on, choosing to be here, is enough. And that offered this relief of, maybe I don't need to carry the weight of the responsibilities and expectations I've had on myself. Maybe if I stop piling things on of responsibilities and things to fix, as someone with a list that loved to find problems and find a solution and fix them. Instead, this space gave me the opportunity to be with them without necessarily knowing what I was going to do, without necessarily knowing how I was going to fix it. Maybe it didn't even need to be fixed. Maybe it just needed to be acknowledged. I cried so much during that week. And that was a gift, because them tears had been held in. There were so many feelings and emotions that had been trapped in. And part of the gift and the invitation of being home alone meant that I actually allowed myself to express that without holding it back. Because at the time, I still judged myself for being emotional around other people, even though I have the most supportive and loving people in my life. Even though I know I'd receive compassion, that I wouldn't be judged for it, there was still part of me that felt a sense of shame for having these feelings, these strong emotions, for crying even. And yet, because I was alone, that was enough for me at the time to allow myself to feel, to express, even though there was judgment, even though I didn't feel great about the fact I was a blubbering wreck at times. It let my body release things that were pushed down and pent up for who knows how long. I hadn't realised how much I'd been holding on to in my body, in my mind, in my way of being. I was pent up, I was tense, and I was tight. And in pausing, it gave me the opportunity to actually notice that there was tension there. And there was discontentment, and boy, was there feelings and emotions, and I didn't know what to do with them all. Just acknowledging them and meeting them and being aware of them was a step in itself, was a gift in itself. And that week didn't mean the challenges weren't there anymore. Those small steps that I took didn't mean the obstacles and the bodily challenges or the work challenges or my perspectives, my mindsets, didn't mean they changed overnight. Didn't mean the problems went away. It did mean it was easier to meet them. That I felt less helpless in where I was at in my life. That I felt a sense of a buoyancy. There was a desire to wake up. There was an awareness that there was some growth there. After months of stagnation and despondency and feeling stuck, to have some sense that maybe there's some forward momentum, maybe there's some change possible here. That was enough for me at the time. And over time, those pauses have built that spaciousness that I allow myself now, that I consciously build into my life now, have made such a difference. Because more and more I'm able to see areas that I've come to feel a victim, to feel disempowered, dissatisfied with. Areas of strong emotion within me, aspects of my life and myself. And I build in time to pause, to journal, to be in nature, to be away from all the spinning plates and the environments that hold all the jobs and the to-dos. And I give myself the chance to just be, to notice what's going on in me, and also what dreams might want to be born, what changes might be calling. It's like following a thread and noticing actually maybe I've been so focused on this big tangled mound, I've not seen that there's a new reel just next to me, that I can pick up a different thread, that maybe I can do the same things in a different way, perceive them in a different way. So, I invite you now to simply breathe and notice how you feel in your body. Notice what this has stirred up in you. You might wish to cultivate your own pause, your own self-reflection time, to mull over, to inquire into, to lean into. And it's less of a head thing and more of a heart thing. To let the mind drop down into the heart, to breathe into that space and say, what does it serve me to be aware of now? Or to invite a question of, how can I feel more empowered in a particular area of my life now? Because noticing, being aware of what is going on in my life and my world has enabled me to grow and transform inwardly and to experience life in a whole new way. From a mindset level, on a physical health level, and on a level that's born of resilience, because every time I've paused and I've seen the discomforts, I've grown, and it hasn't been easy. And I didn't have to do it alone. And I've realised that the more I speak to other people about my vulnerabilities and my challenges, the more I acknowledge them in myself, the more resilient I become. The easier it is to meet the discomforts, the dissatisfactions, the challenges and obstacles in life from a calmer and more centered space, from a less judgmental space. Because I invited in that power of a pause and that time to reflect. So, That's part of the journey of growth for me. And I invite you to share your comments or experiences through this in ways that have inspired or got you reflecting for yourself. May this be a supportive and empowering community where we learn and grow from each other. I'm excited, hopefully soon, to be interviewing other people and sharing the awarenesses, the stories, the practices that have really served other people in their own journeys to feel a sense of empowerment and well-being in their life. So, thank you for joining me, everyone. Namaste. And I wish you well until next time. See you in 2 weeks. Take good care.